you all for 6K subscribers. I really appreciate it.
You don't have to do this.
I can't believe this is happening. I really, truly didn't expect what's going on to be the case. So, back in 2019 and 2020, during the turbulent development of Cold War, there was a second Battle Royale mode that Treyarch was working on, being a sequel to their Blackout mode from BO4. It was a large multi-sectioned map in the Ural Mountains with lots of greenery and snowy areas. However, with the release of Warzone and the COVID-19 pandemic, development was thrown into chaos. And because everyone was stuck at home with not much to do, Warzone flourished. See, this is the unfortunate reality of Warzone's negative effects on Call of Duty. Because the player numbers were inflated during COVID, Activision saw them and put all major dev time and resources into Warzone. And what this did was sacrifice all the other modes and dilute them into being more like Warzone. As when all the studios are forced to put their focus on one mode, it makes it so when we finally get to the other modes for the individual games, they just take the elements from the mode that got the most dev time. That's why we see third modes of the past repurpose elements or assets from the campaign and multiplayer, because that's what all the dev time used to be dedicated to. But now that Warzone is getting all the attention, everything else gets put on the back burner. And that led to Treyarch's Blackout 2 mode being scrapped and its map being repurposed into Outbreak for Cold War. A mode that took zombies and turned it into something it's not. With such a dull and basic gameplay loop that Warzone players flock to level up their guns and get camos. It cannot be understated how much Outbreak has hurt the Zombies game mode since its release. Its perceived popularity from Activision is why we got things like Vanguard Zombies and Modern Warfare Zombies. Just absolute half-baked modes that didn't receive anywhere near as much polish and dev time that they needed to actually be good. And it's no wonder why COD has to advertise round-based maps as a selling point for BO6 and plaster it all over the menus because players were sick of the objective-based, undercooked modes that took elements from zombies but didn't have any of the depth or replayability of the mode. And now, we're doing it all over again. Verdansk has just been re-released. As Call of Duty, and more specifically Black Ops 6, has been bleeding players for months now, Activision brought this map back as some desperate Hail Mary attempt to keep the game alive and bring the player base back. But again, not realizing that it was never the Verdansk map that made Warzone popular, it was the circumstances of the time it came out. And now what happened is the Avalon Warzone map that Treyarch was working on, that many of the BO6 multiplayer maps were based on, has likely been cancelled, and it will be allegedly repurposed as a large objective-based zombie mode for Treyarch's next game, this supposed Black Ops 2 sequel. The exact same thing is going to happen again! I can't do this, man. I can't go through this again. This Warzone shit has been such a plague on Call of Duty that now the same map is going to be responsible for the same problem in two Treyarch games 6 years apart.
Are you serious?
And it's not like the devs are just going to scrap the whole Avalon map itself. There's no way they'd do that. So, we're going to see Outbreak 2. At least according to all these leaks. This is bad. Really, really bad. Because if we're stuck in the same cycle again, and if the Treyarch Zombie dev team continues to not listen to the community, when we say, we don't like the gameplay elements of modern zombies, we want the game mode to go back to what made it popular and replayable in the first place. How can that happen when we're getting the same thing that was everything wrong with modern zombies? How? Do you think these devs will listen? That they'll do away with salvage, weapon rarities, the same field abilities over and over, this awful point system? Do you? Because me, I have major doubts that they will. BO6 Zombies has been a failure. And not because it's a god-awful game, but because it just didn't do what it needed to: bring the community back together. In fact, it's likely divided it more than it's ever been. And for those that argue that The Tomb isn't a bad map, no, it isn't. But coming after a great map like Citadel, The Tomb was underwhelming, disappointing, and completely killed the momentum of the game by being average. If the whole community can completely turn their backs on a game by just one map, how strong was the elements that made up the mode as it was? And even when Treyarch follows up that map with a pretty decent one in Shattered Vale, it's still plagued with the problems that the rest of the maps before it had. The truth is, BO6 is brought down because of all the reused elements from Cold War. All these played out features and ideas that aren't letting the mode get better, but rather stagnate. Treyarch's next game needs to focus on innovation and return to what actually made it great. Not just bringing back random story elements or old characters or fucking Outbreak, but what made it creative, replayable, and fun.